Welcome to Code Alarm's installation video. Before we get started, I'd like to take a little time and explain to you about our company. Code Alarm has been designing, manufacturing, and engineering products for over 15 years. Right here in the U.S., over 100 different models are manufactured, and they are bought and sold all over the world. We are able to work hand in hand with the car manufacturers, designing and engineering products on tomorrow's vehicles today. That keeps Code Alarm one step ahead of the competition. There are a lot of great things to say about Code Alarm, but the two most important things I would say would be number one, quality, and number two, ease of installation. These have been Code Alarm's cornerstones, and I'm sure after watching this video, you will agree. Let's cover some of the tools that we're going to use today in our installation. Power drill, sorted drill bits, socket set, razor knife, 3M electrical tape, auto strippers, panel puller, Klein crimps, assorted screwdrivers, wire snips, brake tubes, nylon tie straps, and some assorted butt connectors. We'll also need a meter and or a test probe. There are two different types of connections that we're going to be using. First one is what we call a wrap and tape method. I've already pre-stripped the wire, as you can see, and I've poked a hole in the wire so that when I insert my mating wire inside here, wrap and tape. Make sure you get 2 wraps of the wire. Also, when taping, I want to cover at least a ½ inch on each side of my connection. It should be covered with my tape. Start here, work your way across the connection. I'm pulling the tape as I'm wrapping it around, stretching the tape, which makes a nice connection. This will not come out. Okay, the other type of connection that we're going to be using today would be a butt connection. For this, we need a good set of crimpers. I recommend using the Klein crimps is what we use. First thing you want to do is load your butt connector into the crimper. Let's say we were going to connect these 2 wires together. Strip off at least a ½ inch on each end of the wire. Twist them up. If you look inside the butt connector, you can see the metal in there. Let's make sure that the crimper is on the metal so that when we squeeze it, it will crimp the steel, not the plastic housing. Insert your wire. Give it a good crimp. Same goes for the other side. Always give it a good pull test. These would be the 2 connections that we're going to be using today. Let me take a second and show you how to use our wire color location guide. This booklet covers all vehicles, wire locations, colors. Makes your installation a lot easier. Pick out the vehicle that you're going to be using. Shows you the color, the location, and the polarity of all wires needed to do the installation. Looked into my color guide, and I've noticed that I need to remove 2 panels to access all the wiring that I need to do the installation. This underdash panel needs to be removed. Left kick panel's got to come off. Careful not to break the plastic. Using my color location chart, it's told me that if I go to the ignition switch harness on this 1994 Ford Explorer, I will find 2 starter wires, which are both red with a blue stripe, which are located right here. Ignition wire, red with a green. Solid yellow, which is my constant hot. Now let's test the wires. Yellow wire should show me voltage at all times. Red with the green is my switched ignition. Right now the wire is resting at ground. That's why the light is green. As soon as I turn the ignition to the on position, That shows me voltage. Should stay hot all the way through the crank position. Starter wires. Two red with a blue. Let's probe the first one. Should go hot only in the crank position. Okay, test the other one. Again, should only go hot in the crank position. Okay, we've located our power, ignition, and starter leads at the ignition switch harness. What we're going to do now is I'm going to access this left kick panel harness, where we will find our dome light wire, parking light wire, and door locks. Take a razor knife, carefully cut the tape back. Okay, now that we've located the wires in the vehicle, let's test them. Brown is our parking light wire. Probe it. Wire is going to be resting at ground, so we're going to have a green light. As soon as I turn the parking light switch on, it's going to turn red. That's our parking light wire. Door lock. It's pink yellow. It's resting at ground. When we hit the lock switch, is going to show us 12 volts. Probe pink green, which is our unlock. It's also resting at ground. When we hit unlock in the driver's door, shows us 12 volts there. Last but not least, the door trigger wire, black with a blue. Right now it's showing us voltage because we have a door open. With all the doors closed, it goes back to ground. And I let my door pin switch out. Ground with the pin switch in, 12 volts with the pin switch out. So we have a positive switching door trigger, positive switching door locks, positive switching parking lights. Now that we've located and determined all our wire colors and locations in the vehicle, let's take a look at the contents of the system. One wire harness, one shock sensor, instruction manual, module and two transmitters, and a siren. I'd like to tell you a little bit about the products. Siren is waterproof. It's 125 dB. Shock sensor has been designed to not detect any type of stray radio frequencies. And of course, this is the module and harness again. First thing I'm going to do is talk about some loops inside the module. I'm going to decase the module. There's a series of loops on the circuit board that can enable or disable certain features of the alarm. What I'd like to show you is the loop location. These loops enable or disable certain functions of the alarm system. I'm going to give you a brief explanation of each loop. Yellow loop, this is designed for if the customer had two vehicles and he had a system in each car and he wanted to have one remote control operate both vehicles, we would need to cut this loop and enable the two-car mode. This loop must be cut on both units. Again, this is called the two-car mode loop. Next loop over is the pink. The pink loop is designed to eliminate the chirps. If the customer does not want the system to chirp when he arms or disarms the system, he would now cut this loop. Again, pink loop is the chirp loop. Next one is brown. Brown is referred to as the auto function loop. When the vehicle's ignition is turned on, the doors lock. When you turn the ignition off, the doors unlock. If this feature is not desired by the customer, cut this loop. This will disable the auto function, which is the lock and unlock with the ignition. Next loop is blue. The blue loop is called the passive arm loop. Passive means automatic. If you want the system to automatically arm, do not cut this loop. If you want the system to manually arm with the transmitter only, then we would cut the blue loop. White loop, which is the next loop, is designed for foreign vehicles that have a vacuum system on the door locks. These vehicles require more than a half a second of power to actuate the door locks. So by cutting this loop, it turns your lock and unlock outputs from a half a second into 5 seconds. So that is the extended door lock loop. Last loop is orange. This loop is the passive lock loop. If the customer desires for the system to automatically arm and lock the doors at the same time, you must cut the orange loop. This will, when the system automatically arms, the doors will lock if this loop is cut. Make sure that the customer does want that, though, because if you cut this loop, the door locks are always going to lock automatically, so you could possibly lock your keys in the car. So make sure that's something that the customer wants. Now that we have our module back together, let's take the transmitters off of the antenna wire. We can set those aside for now. Now I'm going to start my prep on the module. If you have a clamp or some device to hold the module down, it can make the preparation a lot easier. First thing I'm going to do is take my harness apart here, straighten it out a little bit, plug everything onto the module. Plugging our big Molex connector in. You can also refer to your system layout in the instruction booklet and where these wires go. Now I'm going to be plugging on my shock sensor. You also find a 3-pin plug in your harness with 1 black wire. This is designed to give us an active ground output when the system is armed. When the system is armed, this wire goes to ground and stays there. This device can be used for different types of disabling or voice modules. In the installation today, we're not going to be using it. Now what I'd like to do is start with the preparation. I'm going to refer to my system layout, which is in my installation manual. I'm going to work my way down the system layout chart. First wire I'm going to start with is a red power wire. This wire will go to our constant hot wire in the vehicle. Put that aside. Next wire we're going to talk about is the ground wire, which is solid black. This wire will be connected to a good chassis ground. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to install an eyelet on this wire for my ground connection. Good solid crimp. Give it a pull test. We're all set with our ground. Next wire I'm going to talk about is the ignition sense wire. This wire here, thin blue, tells the alarm system when the key is on and when the key is off. So it's important to hook this up to a true ignition wire. Next wire I'm going to talk about is the orange siren wire. Solid orange. This wire supplies a ground to our siren. When we hook up our siren, we're going to tie the red wire off the siren into a constant hot source. The black wire from the siren is going to get connected onto our orange wire, which is again a negative output for the siren. Next wire we're going to talk about is the brown disarm wire. If you noticed on your harness, the disarm wire has a wire with the ground lug on it already. This wire needs to be grounded. I just talked about main ground on the alarm system. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to tie my ground here into my ground. That way I only have to get one ground when I'm doing the installation. My disarm button is now tied into ground. What I would do now is twist the wire. This ends up for a neater installation. Disarm button is now done. Next thing we're going to talk about is the valet switch. Valet switch is exactly the same. Has two wires. This switch is designed to keep the system from automatically arming. If it is in the on position, the system will not automatically arm. If it is in the off position, the system will automatically arm. Our terminal gets connected into cavity number 5, and again it has a ground lug also. So we can tie this into the ground that we've already got, and we're going to plug this into our cavity number 5 on our white Molex connector. You can always refer to the color location chart on the back of the module. It tells you where these wires go. Cavity number 5 is the valet switch. Let's plug that in. If you know in advance that you're going to be using the valet switch and the disarm button, you could ground both of them at the same time. Again, I'm going to twist up my switch just to keep the wires together and to keep a neater installation. These two switches are now completed. They're wired in. We no longer have to worry about them. Next wire we're going to talk about is the gray wire. This gray wire supplies a ground to our LED light, which is going to be mounted in the dash. LED light gets mounted somewhere in the vehicle so that it can be seen from outside. There's no preparation here because we need to drill a hole in the dash and run this through the dash first before we tie any wires in. So I'm going to pull my gray wire aside and leave that alone, and when we get into the installation, we'll be able to put our LED in at that time. Next wire we're going to talk about is the tan wire, which is a trunk release. If the car is equipped with a trunk release, this wire supplies a ground. On this particular unit, you sometimes have to add a relay into the system. On the vehicle that we're doing today, the vehicle does not have a power trunk, so we're going to eliminate this wire at this time. I'm just going to cut it and tape it off. If the car was equipped with a trunk release, this system would pop the trunk for us. Next wires we're going to talk about are the wires that work with the parking lights. There are two wires involved with the parking lights. There's an orange with a black and black with a white. These two wires are used to flash the parking lights. The orange-black wire is the output that goes to the parking light wire. The black-white wire is the polarity wire, which determines the output. If this black-white wire is taken to 12 volts, we're going to have a 12-volt output. If this black-white wire is taken to ground, we're going to have a ground output. Because we already know how to turn the parking lights on in the vehicle, we know that it is at a positive trigger. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to tie my black-white wire into my main power lead, which is red, because they're both going to 12 volts. This is going to save me a step later on in the installation. My parking light polarity is now tied in. This is going to go to my parking light wire in the vehicle. Next wire we're going to talk about is the thin green, which is used for any additional sensor that you might want to tie into the system. An additional pin switch, motion sensor, and some other types of devices can be used. This is a ground trigger. If the system is armed and this wire is grounded, it triggers the alarm. That would be tied in later in the installation. The next few wires we're going to talk about are the door locks. By looking in the wire location guide that we referred to earlier, We've determined what type of locking system is in this vehicle. All 4 wires are going to be used, and we're going to tie those in when we get inside the vehicle. The other wire that we need to talk about briefly is the door lock polarity wire, which is red with a black stripe. This wire determines the output to our door locks. On this particular vehicle that we're doing, it is a positive trigger door lock system. With a positive trigger door lock system, this wire must be tied directly into 12-volt constant. So what I'm going to do is when we do the installation of the door locks, we are going to tie this red-black wire into the feed wire that powers up the door locks in the car. Talk a little bit about the dome light circuit. There are 2 wires on this system. The thin yellow is what we call the negative trigger for negative switching. The white wire is for positive trigger, positive switching. On today's vehicle that we're using, it is a positive switching system. Yellow wire will be omitted. We do not need to use the yellow wire today. We're going to be using the white wire. So again, I would tape that off. Talking once again about the dome light, there's also another wire that ties into the dome light, which is the yellow. This wire is the illuminated entry output. This wire, when the customer comes back to the vehicle and presses the remote control to turn the system off, this wire illuminates his interior for 60 seconds. So both of these wires are going to the same wire in the vehicle. They both go to the dome light wire. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tie them together now, which is going to save me a step once I get inside the vehicle. Last but not least, this is the dome light polarity wire. This wire determines the output for my dome light polarity or my illuminated entry. Because of the vehicle that we're doing today, this wire needs to go to 12 volts. Once again, I'm going to tie it into my main power lead and do a wrap and tape method. I've eliminated and added and tied all wires in that I can possibly do right now, which is going to save us a lot of steps once we get into the installation. Now that I have everything somewhat prepped here, I'm going to harness everything together, straighten it up, I'm going to put a piece of tape about 6 inches from the module to keep my harness neat. Once you've gotten this far with the installation, we're now ready to go into the car. Before we make any connections, let's make sure where we're going to mount the module. I've chosen the upper left kick panel area. There's a good location there where I can mount the module securely. I'm also going to be running my wires from the siren and the LED to this location here, which is the ignition switch harness. So what I've done is I've taken my harness from the module and I've got all these wires together. They're all going to the same location. I have my 2 starter wires, my ground, my ignition, siren, LED, power, and shock sensor. All these are going to this general area. So let's do the connections. First thing I'm going to do is my power connection. I like to tape the wire, my mating wire, to the existing wire first. Tape that around, run your tape across the connection. Power's done. Next thing I want to do is my ignition wire. Switched ignition. Find the red, green. Next thing we're going to do is our starter kill. We've located the wires, we found them, they both get hot in the crank position. Let's cut them. Verify that the vehicle will not start. Okay, the vehicle's dead. Now we need to determine which two go to the switch and which two go to the motor. The switch side of the wires will get hot when I turn the key on. Let's get our test probe. Probe either one. We'll take a guess. Okay, that side doesn't get hot with the switch, so this must be the switch side. I turn my switch on. Shows me voltage when I turn the switch on both of these wires. So these are my switch sides, these are my motor sides. On my alarm system, white with a red stripe goes to the switch, white goes to the motor. Let's do those connections. We're using a butt connector on this connection. Pull test. I take the butt connector on the starter wire because it's a very crucial connection. Starter wire connections are done. Ignition wire connection is done. Power wire connection is done. I still want to, later on in the install, I'm going to be running my siren and my LED to this location, keeping the install nice and neat. Now we're going to hook up the ground wire. I've located a good chassis bolt, steering column bolt. Loosen that up. Careful not to over tighten it. Okay, what I've done is I've taken my wires from the system that are going to the left kick panel area, taped them up, giving them a nice neat appearance. Now I'm going to make my connections. Let's first do the dome light, which is black with a blue that we've tested. Dome light's done. Now let's do the parking light wire. We've tested the brown. Our wire connection is going to be the orange wire. Strip the wire now. So you can see I have all the wires flowing in this direction, which is when I pull my harness tight is going to have a nice neat appearance on the harness. Parking lights are done. Now what I'm going to do is tie in my red-black wire, which is the door lock polarity. On this vehicle, we're going to tie this into the main power lead for the door locks in the vehicle itself, which is black with a white. Black with a white is the power for the door locks in this vehicle, and it will show us 12 volt constant. Okay, strip that back. Again, wrap and tape. This is our power or polarity wire for the door locks. Now we're getting ready to do the door locks, pink, yellow, and pink, green. Because of my color chart information, it's telling me that it is a type 2 door lock system, which is a reversing polarity, positive trigger. I've tested these wires. They show me 12 volts when I hit the lock and unlock switch. Now I'm going to cut them in half. And test my wires. This is where everybody makes the mistake of on door locks. By getting these wires crisscrossed, you can damage the unit or even damage the switches in the vehicle. So it's very important that we determine which two ends get hot when we use the switch. I'm going to guess these two are going to get hot because they look like they're going up into the boot. So let's check pink yellow, which is our lock wire. Press lock switch. Shows us 12 volts. So this is definitely the lock switch wire. Let's probe this wire. Hit unlock. That's definitely our unlock switch. Now if we probe these wires, we're going to get nothing on the test light on either switches. So these are our switches, these are our motors. If you refer to the installation manual, it's going to tell you that the solid blue is lock switch. Strip these wires back. Two ends that get hot are the switch sides. These are the switches, these are the motors. Although on some vehicles, the master switch can be in the passenger door. If it is, we let you know that in our color chart, so it shouldn't be a problem. I am now connecting solid blue lock switch to the pink yellow, which got hot when I hit the switch. Solid green, which goes to the unlock switch, is going to the wire that got hot when I hit the unlock switch in the driver's door. Make your connection. Do a pull test on your butt connectors. Now we only have 2 wires left. We also have 2 wires left in our harness. These wires didn't show us any voltage when we hit the switch. So blue-black is my lock motor, which is pink-yellow. It's a motor wire. Green-black goes to pink-green, unlock motor. Do your pull test. Now you can see that my solid colors go to the 2 that go through the boot and out to the switch. The blue-black and the green-black go to the 2 ends that go to the rest of the motors in the vehicle. These connections are now completed. What you want to do is try to put this back to a factory appearance by harnessing your wires, making sure there isn't any tension on any of these wires. Just take this nylon mesh back up. One of the main reasons why you want to do this type of an installation is if the car ever has any malfunctions, the customer takes it back to the dealer. If you got a big bunch of mess in here, the dealer's going to blame you for any problems in the vehicle. So by keeping it nice and neat and clean, won't have any problems. Reinstall a harness. Plenty of room left for our module to be mounted up under the dash. Now I'm going to mount the siren. A couple things you want to keep in mind when mounting the siren is you want to keep it away from any intense heat and any excessive water splash. There's only a few locations under the hood. The best location I can seem to find is in this location here. But I think it'll be a lot better if we flip the bracket around 180 degrees. It'll give me a better, more secure mount when I mount it in there. So I'm going to flip my bracket, slide my siren down in there. You always want to tape your wires or use some convoluted tubing and run it towards your grommet so that we can run it through the firewall. This gives a neater appearance on the wires, also protects them. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to run the siren wires through the firewall using a piece of brake tube. You can see how I put an edge on the brake tube so that it can pierce the grommet easily. I'm going to slide it through my grommet, and I'm going to run my wires from the inside of the engine compartment into the vehicle. Now I can easily grab my wires, pull my brake tube back through the grommet, leaving my wires going through the grommet. They're protected from any metal surfaces. Makes it easy to go through the firewall in this manner. Now we're going to mount our LED. We've chosen this location for a suitable spot. Always want to make sure that there's nothing behind this panel. Let's pull the panel off. Feel behind there. There's plenty of room behind there. Let's drill our hole. Make sure it's center. Let's run our LED. Route your LED wires over or through an existing harness, keeping them away from moving parts. I'm going to bring them over to my main wire connection location, which is the ignition switch harness. And I'm just going to pull them down for right now. Also, we need to now run the siren leads up and through an existing harness, keeping them away from any moving parts. Running them through over to our main ignition connections. Same as our LED. Can bring that down through. What I'm going to do now is to connect my orange wire, which is a negative siren output, to my negative siren wire that I've ran through the firewall and brought over to this location using a butt connector. Now there's two power sources left. We need to tie the siren power lead into 12-volt constant, and also the LED needs to be tied in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tie my LED right into my siren right now, which we're going to tie in a minute. Now I've supplied my LED with power when I hook up the siren power. Okay, right now I'm tying in my siren lead onto the fuse side of my power lead, which, if you noticed, is between the module and the fuse. If you're ever going to tie on any type of a power accessory, always go between the fuse and the module. Siren is now completed. Okay, after I've done all my wiring connections, I've harnessed my wires together, I still have my two switches left over. I left these for last because these are going to be tucked into or drilled into a panel or somewhere accessible under the dash for the customer. The valley switch operates the passive arming. It will let the system automatically arm by itself, or it will make the system so that it will not automatically arm. The disarm button should be mounted in an inconspicuous area. This button is used for in case the customer loses the transmitter, and it's also used in programming procedures. You can mount these buttons wherever you wish. Also, what I've done is I've mounted the shock sensor. You want to mount the shock sensor to a thick wire harness, as I did, or on some other vehicles that you might encounter, a bracket, something solid, steering column. Make sure that the tie wrap is tight, and make sure that the adjustment knob is accessible so that when you go through testing the system, you can access the adjustment and change it if you wish. After installing the module, make sure that the antenna is straight and away from any other harnesses if possible. Also make sure that the module is not up against any big metal planes underneath the dash. Okay, now that our system is fully installed, let's do a complete function test. By pressing number 1 on a remote control, the system should lock the doors, chirp the siren twice, and flash the lights twice. Got our two chirps, doors are locked, LED should be flashing steady, and it is. Now we want to test the triggered inputs on the alarm. Unlocking a door, as soon as I open the door, the alarm should go off instantly. Press number 1, shuts off the alarm. I'm going to rearm the alarm now. Again, getting my two chirps, doors are locked. Now we want to test the shock sensor device, and there's two stages to the shock sensor. A light touch to the vehicle or a light blow to the vehicle is going to give us a worn away chirp. A solid blow to the vehicle is going to give us a full trigger. That's how the shock sensor works. It works on impact on the vehicle. Let me rearm the system once again. System is now armed. The other thing you want to check is the starter kill and the override switch inside the vehicle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open the door. The alarm is going to go off. I'm going to try to start the vehicle. Okay, the vehicle's not starting. Reach down and press your override switch. Should shut the siren off. Vehicle should start. The other thing you want to check once you get inside the vehicle is when I turn the ignition on, the door should lock. When I turn the ignition off, door should unlock and all the interior lights should come on. Okay, now I'm going to show you how to program additional transmitters. 3 things need to occur when we want to program additional transmitters. First thing, driver's door needs to be open. Second thing, ignition needs to be turned to the on position. Third thing, we need to be holding and pressing in the emergency override button. I'm now holding it in. After 15 seconds, we will hear 3 chirps, letting us know that we've entered the program mode. At this time, we will press the remotes. We are now in the learn mode. Press number 1 on the first remote. It's accepted that remote. Press number 1 on the second remote. It's accepted that remote. Let go of the disarm button. You have now exited the program mode. The system can learn up to 4 different transmitters. That's how you program the transmitters. There are 4 functions to the LED light. Steady flash on the LED means the system is fully armed. If the vehicle is so equipped to automatically arm, and you use the valet switch in the on position, you would have a double flash on the LED, meaning the system is in valet. A rapid flash on the LED means the system has been triggered. No flash on the LED means that the system is in a no function status. Once the system has been fully armed, we get 2 chirps, lights flash, doors lock. Our LED has a steady flash. When you come back to the vehicle and press number 1 once again, it would unlock the doors, disarm the complete system, light the interior, and if the car was so equipped with a trunk, button 2 would pop the trunk for you. In addition to Code Alarm's vehicle security products, we offer a line of accessories. First accessory I'd like to talk about is the WCM1. If the customer is interested in having remote control windows, this unit is designed to make the installation very easy and safe by adding all the relays into the system and adding adjustment pods for the resistance of the windows going up and down. This makes the unit very safe and operable. Next unit I'd like to talk about is the APS1. This is an alternate power source for the customer that would be concerned with having an additional power source or a battery backup. Next device is the GDC1, which is the garage door controller. What the customer can do with this product is he can take it home, mount it in his garage, and he can take one of his remote controls and program it into this device, and from his remote he can open and close his garage door. Output control module. This unit is used on some of our lower end pieces where you only have 1 output and you might want to do some extra things with your alarm. What this unit does is it takes 1 output and turns it into 2 outputs. This device here is pretty much left up to the imagination of the installer. You could probably do 100 different things with this output control module. Again, it's left up to the imagination of the installer. The other thing I want to talk about also is the remote starter. A lot of the wires that we tied into for the alarm system are also tied in for the remote starter. So what we can do is by tying these wires together at these locations, save yourself a lot of time and aggravation once you get inside the vehicle. For instance, the remote starter has a parking light output. So does the remote security system. I tied these together. Now I only have to go to the parking light 1 time. Ground. Both units need a ground. Tied them together, 1 ground. The alarm system interrupts the starter. The remote starter automatically starts the vehicle for us. So we're both going to the same wire. Again, I can take my motor wire from the alarm system and the motor wire or the output wire from the CSM2. Tie them together. I have 1 connection which goes to the starter motor. These are some of the wires that you can tie together which are going to save you time on the installation. I've covered the installation on the alarm and the prepping is completed on this. There's 2 things that you want to take into consideration when you're going to do a remote starter. The first thing is the car must have an automatic transmission. The other thing is the car needs to have an electronic fuel injection. Now I'm going to cover some of the wires on the CSM2, their functions and how they tie into our alarm system. First wire we're going to talk about is the 2 power leads. These must go to 12-volt constant. Next 2 wires I'm going to talk about are the two white with the reds. These two wires go to the starter motor. Next wire I'm going to talk about is the light blue with a black stripe. This wire feeds the car's ignition. This goes to the true ignition wire on the vehicle. Yellow with the white stripe. Yellow with the white stripe feeds the heater output. Solid yellow is the heater wire. This wire goes to the heater, which feeds the heater and the AC unit. Orange-black is the parking light polarity wire. This determines the output for our parking lights. Solid orange goes to the parking light wire. Tan wires for a trunk release, if it's applicable in this installation. The gray-black wire, this is going to run through the firewall, out under the hood, onto the coil or coil pack of the vehicle. This senses the coil or the ignition signal when the car's running, telling the remote start how to function. The white wire is a safety input. Solid white wire is for safety. This would be tied into the brake wire. When the brake is pushed in the car, shuts the remote start off. Dark green, this is also another safety wire. This would be run to a mercury tilt switch or pin switch under the hood. For safety reasons, if the hood is open, the vehicle will not start. The dark blue gets tied into my alarm's ignition sense wire, which is also blue. The brown wire is one of our trigger wires. This is what triggers the remote starter. When the brown wire gets a positive input, it will trigger the remote start. The other trigger wire is pink. The pink wire, when it gets grounded, will trigger the system. The white-black wire is an active ground output. When the remote start is activated, the white-black wire goes to ground for an additional relay in other applications. Last wire on the system is solid black, which is the ground for the remote starter. Now, a lot of these wires that we're using on the remote starter are going to the same location as some of the alarm wires. So what we can do is we can save some time and aggravation by tying these wires together. As you can see, I've already done this. Parking light wire, there's two of them, one from the remote start, one from the alarm. They're both tied together, one wire. I need to go to the starter motor wire with the remote start, and I need to go to the starter motor wire with the alarm. Again, I've tied them together. Same goes for the main power. My main power for my alarm, my main power for my remote start, one power. And again, the ground lead. By tying these wires together, this is when we prep the systems together, it makes the install a lot easier. The other thing I'd like to talk about is our shock sensor. If you noticed on the remote start module, sensor in. This is where the sensor would get plugged. Shock sensor gets plugged in there. There's a jumper lead. It goes from sensor out. Also gets tied into our alarm where the shock sensor would normally be on a normal installation. Now the sensor runs in and out of both systems so that when the car remote start is used, the shock sensor is disabled. We've now completed the preparation of the remote start and the vehicle security systems. But remember, all vehicles are different and all installations are different. So today I'm just trying to show you some basic techniques to make your job easier. One note of caution on the remote starter. Remote starter, when you install one, the car must be equipped with an automatic transmission and electronic fuel injection. Now let's get ready to do the installation. Okay, what we've done here is we prepped our alarm system with the remote starter. We've installed the complete alarm system and all its wiring. The only thing we have left over is the existing wiring left over for the remote start. Okay, the first thing we want to do is this is my trigger wire from the alarm system. This is my trigger input from the remote starter. So what I'm going to do is tie these two wires together. When I push number 3, button 3 on my transmitter, it's going to give me a negative signal out of my pink wire here, and my pink wire going into the remote start is the negative trigger to turn the remote starter on. Okay. On my alarm system, there is a blue ignition wire that you would normally tie into the ignition sense wire on this vehicle, which would be red with a green. But because of the functionality of the two systems together, we need to tie in the ignition wire from the Code Alarm remote alarm system into the ignition sense wire off of the remote starter, which is also blue. So let's tie those two together. So one thing nice about Code Alarm products is they color code the two units to work together to make it easier to install. So pink to pink, blue to blue. Okay, we're also going to tie in the true ignition wire, which is the ignition feed from the remote starter to power up the ignition. On this vehicle, it's red with a green. Let's tie that in now using the wrap and tape method. This wire powers up the vehicle's ignition so that the car can start. Gives power to the spark plugs, gives power to the accessories inside the car. There's also another wire here that we need to tie into, which is the heater wire. If you refer to the color guide, it'll tell you that it's gray with a yellow stripe. By applying power to this wire here, it's going to turn on, power up our AC and our heater and blower motors. Yellow wire coming from our remote starter feeds these motors, the AC and the heater blower motor. Okay, now our AC motor is hooked up. We still need to mount the shock sensor. I had to leave that hanging. We also have our tack lead and our hood pin switch lead for safety. This green wire is going to be run out through the firewall and tied into a pin switch so that if the hood's ever opened, the vehicle remote starter cannot operate. Also, we need to tie into another safety wire, which is our white wire. Gets tied right into the brake pedal. We need to find a wire that shows us voltage when the brake is pushed. This wire, if the brake is pushed, sends a signal to the remote starter and shuts it off. This wire shows 12 volts when the brake is pushed. That's the wire we want to tie into. Run my wire up with the existing harness. Give myself plenty of slack. Again, let's tape our wires up, keeping the harness nice and neat, giving that factory appearance. The two wires we have left are our tack and pin switch. These will be run through the firewall and hooked up to the tack and pin switch out under the hood. There's our 4 wires that we need: tack, pin switch, siren power, siren ground. Now, this particular vehicle, we're going to locate the coil pack, which is right here. All our spark plugs come to this general location. I've located a yellow with a white stripe, which is the wire we call out. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set my meter to AC. I'm going to take my positive lead to 12 volts, and I'm going to probe the tack wire with my negative side of the meter. Now, when we start the vehicle, we're going to have a little, you can see the increase on the meter. Now, when we rev up the engine, you can see the meter increase. This is a good sign. This is a good sign of the proper tack wire for a remote start. Now, let's hook up that tack wire. I'm going to do a wrap and tape. One more accessory I'm going to show you today is the pin switch. This can be used for 2 reasons. One, for a safety feature for the remote starter, so if the hood is ever open, the remote start will not operate. 2, to protect the hood from opening for your alarm system. All you need to do is find a location that's clear underneath, drill a hole. The pin switch comes with 2 mounting bolts that can be adjusted to any height desired. In this application, we need it about right there. Put on your bottom mounting bolt, tighten them down with a wrench. Hood gets closed, loses a connection. The hood is open, makes a connection, either keeping the remote start from starting or triggering the alarm system. This is what your finished install should look like. 2 nice harnesses taped neatly with a factory appearance. Now we can tuck our modules, securely mount them underneath the dash, and tie wrap these harnesses up securely, eliminating any type of problems down the road. This is how the system would work on this particular application. By pressing number 3 on the remote, you would get 1 flash of the parking light. Vehicle starts running. To shut the system down, just press number 3 once again. Immediately shuts the system off. There's another way this system can work. By pressing number 1 on the system, fully arming the system, locking the doors, the system's fully armed now. You can start the vehicle while the system is armed. By just pressing number 3, it's going to start the vehicle. The system is fully armed with the vehicle running. In this type of a situation, what you would want to do is come back, disarm your alarm, get inside the vehicle, turn your ignition to the on position, and press the foot brake, and that disarms the remote starter and shuts it off so that you can drive your vehicle, and it is now in normal operation. Everyone here at Code Alarm would like to thank you for attending our installation seminar today. And we also, once again, thank you for purchasing Code Alarm, where technology and simplicity come together.